The giant doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep sound that echoed through the huge space. Ambassador Tejo walked in slowly, his black shoes making soft clicks on the smooth crystal floor. Behind him came two other humans, Bora, a woman in military uniform, and Dong-hyun, a man carrying a tablet full of scientific data. The chamber was massive. The ceiling was so high that it disappeared into darkness above them. Around the circular room sat creatures from 47 different worlds. Some looked like giant insects with too many arms. Others were tall and thin like living shadows. A few glowed with their own light, and some had skin that looked like colored glass. Every single one of them was staring at the three humans. Tejo had been Earth's top negotiator for 15 years. He had handled wars, peace treaties, and trade deals that saved millions of lives. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. The weight of representing all of humanity pressed down on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. He reached the center, platform, and stopped. The platform was raised above the floor so everyone could see him clearly. Around him, the alien creatures shifted in their seats. Some made clicking sounds. Others whispered in languages that sounded like wind through metal tubes. Then the laughter started. It began as a low rumble from the vegan section. Woo-sung, who stood nearly 3 meters tall and had arms as thick as tree trunks, was making a sound like rocks falling down a mountain. The Arcturians joined in next. Their laughter sounded like birds, but not pleasant birds, more like the kind that ate dead things. Soon the entire chamber was filled with the sound of 47 different species laughing at humanity. Hei-jin, the Arcturian prime speaker, rose from her seat. She had 4 arms instead of 2, and her skin was the color of deep purple. Her eyes were large and completely black with no white parts at all. When she spoke, her voice was clear and sharp, like breaking glass. "Honored beings of the council," she said, and the laughter slowly died down. "Today we have a special presentation. The humans wish to contribute to our Nexus Defense Initiative." More laughter erupted. Someone in the back made a sound like a coffee pot boiling over. Hei-jin continued with a smile that showed too many teeth. "This is the same species that took until last year to build a working faster-than-light engine. The same species that needed our help just to reach this station without getting lost in space." Woo-sung stood up next. His voice was so deep it made the floor vibrate under Tejo's feet. "Their most advanced weapons are still bullets and explosives," he rumbled. "Metal pieces flying through the air. How very traditional." The word traditional was said in a way that made it sound like an insult. Na-ri, who looked like a living crystal sculpture, pulsed with bright blue light. "I have studied their military reports," she said in a voice like wind chimes. "In their biggest war, they used flying machines made of metal and fabric." "Fabric! Like clothing that flies!" The laughter grew louder. Some creatures were holding their sides. Others were wiping tears from eyes that were nothing like human eyes. Tejo felt his face grow warm, but he kept his expression calm. Next to him, Bora's hands were tight fists, and Dong-hyun was staring at his tablet like he wanted to disappear inside it. Minho, who looked like a giant grasshopper wearing a spacesuit, clicked his mouth parts together. Among his species, this was the same as rolling your eyes. "The Devourer fleet has consumed 17 star systems," he said. 17 entire solar systems gone, billions of lives ended. Planets turned into nothing but space dust. He gestured with one of his 6 arms toward a huge screen that appeared in the air above them. The screen showed images that made Tejo's stomach turn. Massive ships that looked like they were alive, with metal and flesh mixed together in horrible ways. They moved through space like sharks through water, eating everything in their path. "These creatures," Minho continued, "have absorbed the technology of every species they have consumed. They have learned to use our plasma weapons, our energy shields, our quantum computers. They adapt to everything we throw at them." The screen changed to show battle footage. Tae-ho watched as beautiful advanced ships fired weapons that could destroy moons. The Devourer vessels simply absorbed the attacks and grew stronger. "And you think," Min-ho said, his voice full of disbelief, "that creatures who still use gunpowder can help us?" More laughter filled the chamber. Some beings were laughing so hard they could barely stay in their seats. Kyung-hee, who came from a species that looked like tall, thin humans made of silver metal, spoke next. Her voice had no emotion in it at all. "Analysis shows that human technology is approximately 4,000 years behind current galactic standards," she said. "Their computing power is less than what we use in children's toys. Their energy production methods are so primitive, they still burn dead plants for power." Yeon-soo, the council leader, finally stood up. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at directly, like trying to stare at a bright light. Her skin was almost transparent, and her hair seemed to be made of starlight. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "Ambassador Tae-ho," she said, and her words carried to every corner of the huge chamber. "We appreciate humanity's enthusiasm, but surely you understand the situation we face. The Devourer fleet has destroyed civilizations that had mastered space travel, while your species was still learning to make fire." She gestured gracefully with hands that seemed to glow from within. "Our combined fleets represent the greatest military power in galactic history. We have weapons that can crack planets in half. We have shields that can stop the energy of an exploding star. We have computers that can think faster than light itself." The chamber fell quiet as her words sank in. "And yet," she continued, "we are losing. Every battle costs us ships we cannot replace. Every system we lose makes the Devourer fleet stronger. They learn from every attack, adapt to every strategy." She looked directly at Tae-ho with eyes that seemed to see through him. "What could your species possibly offer that we have not already tried?" The silence stretched out like a tight rope. Tae-ho could feel the eyes of every creature in the chamber on him. Some were curious. Most were amused. A few seemed almost sorry for him, like adults watching a child try to fix something that was clearly broken beyond repair. Behind him, Bo-ra shifted slightly. Dong-hyun cleared his throat softly. These small sounds seemed incredibly loud in the vast, quiet space. Tae-ho took a deep breath and stepped forward to the edge of the platform. "Honored Council," he said, his voice steady and calm despite everything. "Humanity may be new to space travel. We may be behind in technology. Our weapons may seem simple to you." He paused and looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as he could. "But we have something that might surprise you." The laughter that followed was even louder than before. The laughter in the chamber went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. Tae-ho stood perfectly still on the platform, waiting for it to die down. His face showed no anger, no embarrassment, no fear. He had learned long ago that showing emotion at the wrong time could ruin everything. Yeon-soo raised one of her glowing hands, and slowly the noise faded away. Her transparent skin seemed to shimmer as she looked down at the human ambassador. Around the chamber, creatures were still making small sounds of amusement. Someone in the back row was making a noise like a tea kettle whistling. "Very well, Ambassador." "Tae-ho," Yeon-soo said. Her voice was like music, but there was something cold underneath it. "We are curious about this surprise you mention. But first, you must understand what we are facing." The giant screen above them came alive again. This time it showed a map of the galaxy. Hundreds of star systems glowed like tiny lights in the darkness. But as they watched, some of those lights began to go out. One by one, they disappeared into black nothing. "Each light that dies," Yeon-soo continued, "represents billions of lives. The Kepler colony worlds had 23 billion people. The Rigel system had 41 billion, all gone in less than a week. The screen changed to show the Devourer fleet up close. The ships were nightmare creatures made real. They looked like someone had mixed giant sea animals with machines, but badly, like a child's drawing come to life. Parts of them pulsed like hearts. Other parts glowed with stolen energy. They moved through space in ways that hurt to watch, twisting and bending like they didn't follow the same rules as everything else. Il Sung, the Vegan strategist, stood up slowly. He was even taller than Wu Sung, but thinner, like a tree that had grown too fast. His voice was careful and precise. "These creatures do not fight like normal enemies," he said. "They do not have weak points. They do not make mistakes. Every time we hurt them, they learn from it and become stronger." The screen showed battle footage again. Tae-ho watched advanced warships fire weapons that lit up space like new suns. The blasts hit the Devourer ships, and it did nothing. The strange enemy vessels simply absorbed the energy and grew bigger. "They took our plasma technology at the Battle of Arcturus," Il Sung continued. "Now they use it against us, but better than we ever could. They stole antimatter weapons from the Vegan fleet. Now they can make antimatter bombs that are 10 times more powerful than ours." Min-ho, the insect-like commander, made clicking sounds. That meant he was thinking hard. "At Tau Ceti, they captured one of our psychic warfare specialists. Within hours, they had learned to use mental attacks against us. They turned our own thoughts into weapons." The chamber was quiet now. The laughter had stopped completely. Even the creatures who had been most amused by humanity's offer were looking serious. Nari, the crystal being, pulsed with a dim red light. Among her people, this color meant sadness. "We have tried everything," she said in her wind chime voice. "Direct assault, stealth attacks, biological weapons, computer viruses, reality-bending technology. Nothing works for more than one battle." Kyung-hee, the silver medal woman, added her emotionless analysis. "Current projections show complete galactic conquest by the Devourer fleet within 18 standard months. There is a 97.3% chance that all current civilizations will be extinct within 2 years." The weight of these words settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. Tae-ho could see it in the way creatures shifted in their seats, in the dimming of lights that came from living beings, in the small sounds of despair that leaked out despite everyone's attempts to stay strong. This was when Tae-ho made his move. "That's exactly why they won't see us coming," he said clearly. The words cut through the heavy silence like a knife. Every head in the chamber turned to look at him again. But this time, there was no laughter. Bora stepped forward. She had been quiet until now, but Tae-ho could see that she was ready. Her military training showed in the way she stood, the way she moved, the way she looked at the alien creatures around them without fear. "We have a proposal," she said. Her voice was strong and clear. "Give us one of your old ships. Something. You don't need any more. Something broken or out of date. Give us 3 days to work on it." She paused and looked around the chamber. "If we can't prove that humanity can help in this war, we will leave. We will withdraw from the Galactic Council. We will stop asking for aid or support. You will never see us again." The silence that followed was different from before. Before, it had been the silence of people trying not to laugh. Now it was the silence of people trying to understand something they had never heard before. Hyjin, the purple Arcturian, tilted her head to one side. "And if you succeed in this demonstration," she asked. "Then you give us a real chance," Tae-ho said. "You let us help save the galaxy." Woo-sung made a sound like distant thunder. "You speak of proving yourselves against the Devourer technology. But we cannot risk letting them capture any new information. If they learn something from your attempt and become stronger, we could lose the war even faster." Dong-hyun finally spoke up. He had been quiet through all of this, just holding his tablet and taking notes. But now he stepped forward with the confidence of a man who knew his science was solid. "We propose testing against a captured Devourer drone," he said. something you already have in containment. If our method fails, the drone learns nothing new because it's already cut off from the main fleet. If our method works, we might have the first real victory against these creatures in 10 years, Yan-Su finished. The council leader stood up and seemed to float rather than walk as she moved closer to the platform. Her starlight hair moved around, her head like it was underwater. When she was close enough, Tae-ho could see that her eyes were completely white, with tiny points of light deep inside them, like distant stars. "This is a dangerous game you propose, human," she said softly. "If you fail, your species loses any chance of survival when the devourers reach your solar system. If you succeed but your method cannot be replicated or scaled up, you have gained, nothing but a few extra months of life." She studied his face carefully. "Why would you risk everything on such a desperate chance?" Tae-ho thought about Earth. He thought about his wife and daughter waiting for him at home. He thought about all the billions of people who had no idea that their entire species was about to be tested by creatures beyond their understanding. "Because," he said quietly, "desperate chances are sometimes the only real chances we get." The chamber was so quiet now that he could hear the soft hum of the life support systems. Somewhere in the distance, a piece of equipment beeped once and then fell silent. Yeon-su closed her star-filled eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, again she had made her decision. "Very well," she said. "The Council will provide you with a decommissioned Arcturian scout vessel. You will have 72 standard hours to prepare your demonstration. The test will be conducted at Proxima Station against a Class 7 Devourer drone currently in containment." Raised her voice so it carried to every corner of the vast chamber. "If the human method fails, they will leave Galactic Council space immediately and permanently. If it succeeds, they will be granted full consideration as partners in the Nexus Defense Initiative." Around the chamber, creatures began to stir and whisper among themselves. Some seemed excited by the possibility of a new approach to an old problem. Others looked worried about giving the primitive humans any chance to make things worse. Tae-ho bowed slightly to Yeon-su and then to the rest of the council. "Thank you for this opportunity," he said. "We will not waste it." As he turned to leave with Bo-ra and Dong-hyun, he heard Min-ho make a comment to the creature sitting next to him. 72 hours, the insect commander clicked. "I almost feel sorry for them. They have no idea what they've just agreed to face." But Tae-ho was already thinking about the work ahead. 3 days to prove that humanity deserved to survive. 3 days to show the galaxy that sometimes the best solutions came from the most unexpected places. 3 days to change everything. 3 days passed faster than anyone expected. The human team had worked without stopping, sleeping only a few hours at a time. Tae-ho had barely left the old Arcturian scout ship that the Council had given them. It was a small vessel, maybe 50 years old, with systems that had been considered outdated even when it was new. Now the Council was gathering again at Proxima Station, a massive space platform that floated in empty space between star systems. The station was used for dangerous experiments that were too risky to do near populated worlds. Today's test definitely counted as dangerous. Through the huge windows of the observation deck, the council members could see the human ship floating in the distance. It looked exactly the same as it had 3 days ago. No new weapons were visible. No additional armor had been added. No extra engines or fancy equipment could be seen anywhere on the hull. Hei-jin, the purple Arcturian, examined the sensor readings with her 4 arms moving in different directions at once. "I see no significant modifications," she announced to the other council members. "The ship appears to be completely unchanged." Woo-sung, the massive vegan, rumbled his agreement. "Their power output is actually lower than when we gave them the ship. If anything, they have made it worse." Min-ho clicked his mandibles in what might have been confusion or amusement. "Perhaps they spent 3 days trying to figure out how to turn it on," he suggested. Several other creatures made sounds that might have been laughter, but not everyone was amused. Yun-Su, the council leader, stood at the main observation window with her starlight hair flowing around her shoulders. Her white eyes, with their tiny points of light, were focused on something the others could not see. "There is something different," she said quietly. "I cannot sense what it is, but something has changed." Nari, the crystal being, pulsed with curious yellow light. "The energy signatures are unusual," she admitted. "Not stronger, but different in a way that my sensors cannot identify." Kyung-hee, the emotionless metal woman, was running calculations on a holographic display that floated in front of her silver face. "Analysis shows no logical explanation for confidence in this approach," she stated. "Success probability remains near zero." At the far end of the observation deck, a heavily armored section contained the test target. The Devourer drone had been captured 6 months ago during a battle near the Rigel system. Even in its dormant state, it was terrifying to look at. The thing was about the size of a small building, but it moved and shifted like it was alive. Parts of it looked like metal, but metal that breathed and pulsed. Other parts looked like flesh, but flesh that sparked with electricity and glowed with stolen energy. Tubes and wires grew out of it like veins, connecting to parts that seemed to serve no purpose except to make it look more horrible. "The drone has been in containment for 183 days, Il-sung, the tall vegan strategist, reported. It has attempted to break free 47 times. Each attempt was different from the last. It learns and adapts even while trapped." As if it had heard him, the drone suddenly moved. Not much, just a slight shift that made the containment field around it flicker. But every creature in the observation room took a step backward. "Beginning test sequence," announced the station's computer system. "All personnel to safety positions." The human ship began to move toward the containment area. Inside the ship, Tae-ho sat in the pilot's seat, even though he had never flown anything more advanced than Earth's old space shuttles. The controls were completely different from anything he had trained on, but Bo-Ra had figured out the basics and taught him what he needed to know. "Systems ready," Bo-Ra reported from the engineering station. She had bags under her eyes from 3 days of non-stop work, but her voice was steady and professional. Dong-hyun was at the science station, his hands moving over controls that he had learned to use through pure trial and error. "All readings are normal," he said. "The payload is ready for deployment." "Remember," Jae-sung said from the back of the small bridge, "we only get one chance at this. If the drone adapts to what we're doing, it will be ready for the same trick next time." Tae-ho nodded and pushed the ship forward. Through the front window, he could see the containment field that held the Devourer drone. It was like a bubble of energy, invisible except for the slight shimmer it made in space. "The moment we enter that field," Bo-Ra warned, "the drone will wake up completely. It will start scanning our ship and trying to learn from our technology." "That's what we're counting on," Tae-ho replied. The ship crossed into the containment field, and immediately everything changed. The Devourer drone came alive like a sleeping monster waking up hungry. Parts of it that had been still suddenly started moving. Lights began flashing along its surface. The horrible mix of metal and flesh began to shift and change as the creature started analyzing the human ship. In the observation deck, the council members watched with intense interest. They had seen this happen many times before. The drone would scan the attacking ship, learn everything it could about the technology, and then either destroy the ship or absorb it completely. "Drone is activating adaptive systems," Kyung-hee reported, reading data from her sensors. "Beginning technology integration sequence." On the screen in front of them, they could see energy patterns flowing from the human ship to the drone. The creature was doing what it always did, stealing the technology it was facing and making it part of itself. "Power coupling established," Minho observed. "The drone is accessing their computer systems." "It's learning their weapon systems," added Hai-jin. and their defensive systems, and their navigation systems. For several minutes, nothing seemed to happen. The drone continued its scan of the human ship while the humans just sat there and let it happen. To the watching aliens, it looked like the humans had given up before the fight even started. "I do not understand their strategy," Il-sung said slowly. "They are allowing the drone to learn everything about their technology without fighting back." Then something began to go wrong with the drone. It started small. A few lights flickered and went out. Some of the moving parts slowed down. The energy flow between the drone and the human ship began to change direction. "What is happening?" Wu-sung asked, his deep voice showing confusion for the first time. The changes in the drone got worse. More lights went dark. Entire sections of the creature seemed to be shutting down. The horrible mixture of metal and flesh began to stop moving. "Impossible," Heijin whispered, all four of her arms frozen in shock. "The adaptive systems should be countering any attack. The drone should be getting stronger, not weaker." But the drone was definitely getting weaker. Large pieces of it went completely dark. The energy that had made it glow like a sick star began to fade away. The movement that had made it seem alive slowed to a stop. Within 10 minutes of entering the containment field, the Devourer drone was completely inactive, not sleeping like it had been before, but truly dead. Systems that had worked for decades were silent. Technology that had been stolen from dozens of advanced civilizations was useless. The observation deck was completely quiet. Every creature was staring at the screens that showed the dead drone and the unchanged human ship. "Status report," Yeon-su finally said, her musical voice tight with disbelief. Kyung-hee's sensors worked frantically to understand what had happened. "The drone's central processing systems have suffered complete cascade failure," she reported. "All adaptive functions are offline. All learned technologies are inaccessible. The creature is dead." "How?" asked Nari, her crystal form flickering through several colors as she tried to process what she had seen. The answer came through the communication system as Tae-ho's voice reached the observation deck. "Honored Council," he said. And despite everything they had just witnessed, his voice was as calm and steady as ever. "We are ready to explain what you have just seen." "The drone was not defeated by a weapon," Dong-hyun added, his scientist's voice filled with quiet satisfaction. "It was defeated by something much simpler and much more human," Bo-ra finished. Yeon-su leaned forward, her star-filled eyes wide with amazement. "What did you do to it?" Tae-ho's answer was simple, but it changed everything. "We lied to it." The silence that followed was different from any silence that had ever filled the Galactic Council chambers. It was not the silence of laughter waiting to begin, or the silence of creatures trying to be polite. It was the silence of minds trying to understand something completely new. "Explain," Yeon-su said quietly. And as the human ship flew slowly back toward the station, Tae-ho began to tell them about humanity's greatest weapon, the ability to deceive an enemy so completely that they destroyed themselves trying to understand the deception. The council chamber had never been so quiet. Every single creature was focused on the three humans who stood on the platform in the center of the room. The test results were still being displayed on screens around the chamber. A completely dead Devourer drone and an unchanged human ship. Tae-ho looked around at the faces staring at him. Some of the aliens looked confused. Others looked amazed. A few looked worried, as if they had just realized that humans might be more dangerous than they had thought. "The Devourers have one great strength," Tae-ho began, his voice carrying clearly through the huge space. "They can learn from any technology they encounter. They absorb it, understand it, and make it part of themselves." He gestured toward the screen showing the dead drone. "But that same strength is also their greatest weakness." Dong-hyun stepped forward with his tablet. For 3 days he had worked with technology that was centuries ahead of anything on Earth. Now he was going to explain how they had turned that advanced technology against itself. The Devourer learning process follows a pattern, Dong-hyun said, his scientist's training clear in his careful words. First, they scan and identify technology. Second, they analyze how it works. Third, they integrate it into their own systems. He touched his tablet and a hologram appeared above the platform. It showed a simplified diagram of how the Devourer drone-processed information. The problem is that they expect all technology to be honest, Dong-hyun continued. They expect that when they scan a power system, they are looking at a real power system. When they analyze a weapon, they believe it is actually a weapon. Bora joined the explanation, her military background helping her describe the tactical aspects. We built something that looked like a standard ship system, but was actually something completely different. The hologram changed to show the human ship's modified systems. To the watching aliens, it looked like a normal power distribution network, the kind of thing every spaceship needed to function. What the drone saw, Bora explained, was a simple energy management system. Nothing threatening, nothing unusual, just basic technology for moving power around the ship. She paused and looked around the chamber. What the drone actually absorbed was a virus. The word virus caused a stir among the council members. Several creatures made questioning sounds in their own languages. Others leaned forward to hear better. Il-sung, the tall vegan strategist, was the first to speak. Explain this term, virus. Jae-sung, the human engineer who had built the modified systems, stepped forward to answer. He had grease under his fingernails and his hair was messy from 3 days of non-stop work, but his voice was confident. A virus is a piece of code that spreads through computer systems, he said. It looks like normal programming, but it carries instructions that can damage or destroy the systems it infects. He gestured toward the hologram, which now showed how the virus had spread through the drone's systems. The drone thought it was learning how to build a better power system, Jae-sung continued. Instead, it was installing a program that would cause cascading failures throughout its entire network. Kyung-hee, the emotionless metal woman, processed this information with her advanced analytical systems. You created false technology signatures, she said slowly. Technology that appeared to serve one function but actually served another. Exactly, Tae-ho confirmed. We lied about what our systems were designed to do. Hae-jin, the purple Arcturian, moved all 4 of her arms in a gesture that showed she was thinking hard. But how did you know this would work? The Devourers have encountered computer viruses before. They have learned to defend against such attacks. Dong-hyun smiled for the first time since entering the council chamber. That's the beautiful part, he said. They have learned to defend against viruses that look like viruses. They have never encountered a virus that looks like something completely harmless. The hologram changed again to show the exact moment when the drone had integrated the human power system into its core processes. The drone's security systems never activated, Dong-hyun explained, because they never detected a threat. As far as the drone could tell, it was just learning about a new type of power distribution network. By the time the virus began causing problems, Bora added, it was already spread throughout the drone's entire system. Every process, every function, every piece of stolen technology was connected to the infected network. Minho, the insect, Commander, clicked his mandibles rapidly as he processed this information. You used their own learning ability against them, he realized. The more completely they absorbed your false technology, the more damage they did to themselves. Yes, Tae-ho said simply. We gave them exactly what they expected, new technology to steal and integrate. They never suspected that the technology was designed to destroy them from within. Nari, the crystal being, pulsed with several different colors as she worked through the implications. This approach could work against the entire Devourer fleet. she said, her wind chime voice filled with growing excitement. But Wu Sung, the massive vegan, raised a concern that others were thinking. If this technique is so effective, what prevents you from using it against us? How do we know that human technology is not already infected with such deceptions? The question hung in the air like a heavy weight. Every creature in the chamber was suddenly looking at the humans with new eyes. If humanity could deceive the Devourers so completely, what was to stop them from deceiving their new alien allies? Taeho had expected this question. In fact, he had been surprised it had taken this long for someone to ask it. Because, he said, quietly, deception only works when people don't expect it. He gestured around the chamber at all the alien faces watching him. For months, you have seen humanity as honest, straightforward, too simple for complicated political games. You have treated us like children who don't understand how the galaxy really works. Bo-Ra picked up the explanation. That perception, your belief that we are too primitive to be deceptive, is exactly what made our plan possible against the Devourers. The Devourers made the same mistake you did, Dong-hyun added. They looked at our simple technology and assumed it was exactly what it appeared to be. They never considered that we might be smart enough to trick them. Yeon-su, who had been silent through the entire explanation, finally spoke. Her voice was thoughtful, as if she was working through a complex problem in her mind. You are saying that your reputation for honesty was itself a weapon, she said slowly. In a way, yes, Taeho confirmed. But more than that, we're offering to give up that weapon forever. He activated a control on his wrist, and new holograms appeared around the chamber. These showed detailed technical specifications, manufacturing, instructions, and complete documentation of the virus they had created. We are sharing everything, Taeho announced. Every species, every world in the Council gets complete access to this technology, the plans for building it, the methods for deploying it, and the knowledge to defend against it. The chamber erupted in surprised sounds from dozens of different species. This was not what anyone had expected. Furthermore, Bo-Ra added, her military training evident in her formal tone. We are providing detailed information on how to detect and counter this type of deception. If any species ever tries to use similar tactics against council members, you will be ready. Jae-sung activated another display showing defensive programming. We have already designed security systems that can identify false technology signatures, he said. Every council member will receive these protections as part of the package. Sun-hee, the empathic Centaurian representative, had been quiet until now. Her species could sense the emotional truth behind words, and she suddenly radiated certainty. They mean what they say, she announced to the chamber. There is no deception in this offer. They truly intend to share everything and give up their advantage. Yeon-su closed her star-filled eyes for a long moment. When she opened them again, her expression had changed completely. Why? She asked simply. Why give up such a powerful weapon? Why share technology that could keep your species safe? Taeho thought about his answer carefully. Everything that happened next would depend on what he said in the next few minutes. Because the galaxy is bigger than just humanity, he said finally. Because the Devourer fleet is a threat to everyone, not just us. And because... He paused and looked directly at Yeon-su. Because we would rather be trusted partners than feared enemies. The silence that followed was the deepest yet. But this time, it was not the silence of confusion or disbelief. It was the silence of minds changing, of old assumptions being replaced by new understanding. Finally, Yeon-su stood up from her seat and seemed to float down to the platform where the humans waited. Ambassador Taeho, she said formally, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I accept your proposal. 3 months had passed since the demonstration at Proxima Station. The Galactic Council chambers looked very different now. Where once there had been empty seats representing dead civilizations, new members had joined from systems that had been freed from devourer control. The chamber buzzed with activity and hope, instead of fear and despair. Tae-ho stood at the same platform where he had once been laughed at by the entire galaxy, but now the creatures around him looked at him with respect, and some with something approaching awe. The change had not happened overnight, but it had been faster than anyone expected. "The latest reports from the Outer Rim," announced Kyung-hee, her emotionless voice somehow managing to sound pleased, "show complete success of Operation Trojan Horse. The 7th Devourer Fleet has been eliminated with 0 losses to our forces." A cheer went up from the assembled beings. It was a strange sound, made by dozens of different species, but it was unmistakably a sound of celebration. Yeon-su, floating at her position as council leader, gestured for quiet. Her starlight hair seemed brighter than usual, and the tiny points of light in her white eyes sparkled with something that might have been joy. "This makes 15 Devourer fleets destroyed," she announced. "For the first time in 20 years, they are retreating instead of advancing." The success had been even greater than anyone dared to hope. The virus technique that humanity had developed worked better against large fleets than it had against the single test drone. The Devourer's habit of sharing information between ships meant that one infected vessel could spread the virus to an entire fleet within hours. Bo-Ra, who now wore the uniform of a Galactic Defense Force admiral, stood at a tactical display showing the current positions of all known Devourer forces. Red marks showed enemy fleets, but there were far fewer red marks than there had been 3 months ago. Intelligence reports suggest the remaining Devourer forces are avoiding any contact with Council ships, she reported. They appear to have learned to fear technology they cannot understand. The irony was not lost on anyone. Creatures that had spent decades learning and adapting to everything they encountered were now afraid to learn anything new. The possibility that any piece of technology might be a disguised weapon had made them cautious for the first time in their existence. Minho, the insect commander, clicked his mandibles in what his species considered laughter. "They have become afraid of their own greatest strength," he observed. "The ability to learn has become a liability when they cannot trust what they are learning." But not everyone in the chamber was entirely comfortable with the new situation. Wu Sung, the massive vegan, had been quiet during most of the celebration. Now he stood up, his tree-trunk arms crossed over his chest. "I do not question our success," he rumbled, his deep voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "But I am troubled by the methods we have embraced. We have learned to fight with lies and deception. What does this make us?" It was a question that had been bothering several species. The galaxy had always fought its wars with honor, using superior technology and strategy. The human approach of deliberate deception felt wrong to many of the older civilizations. Il-sung, the vegan strategist, nodded his agreement with Wu-sung. "War has rules," he said carefully. "There are ways that civilized beings fight and ways that they do not. Have we compromised our principles to achieve victory?" The chamber grew quiet as creatures considered this question. It was Dong-hyun who answered, stepping forward with the patient manner of a teacher explaining something important to students. "There is a difference between lying to harm innocent people and lying to stop a force that consumes entire civilizations," he said. "The Devourers do not follow your rules of war. They do not spare civilians. They do not take prisoners. They do not negotiate." He gestured toward a screen showing images of planets that had been consumed by the Devourer fleets. Empty space where billions of lives had once existed. "Sometimes," Dong-hyun continued, "the choice is not between right and wrong. Sometimes the choice is between survival and extinction." Nari, the crystal being, pulsed with thoughtful blue light. "The humans have shown us that there are different kinds of strength," she said in her wind chime voice. "Not all power comes from bigger weapons or faster ships." He-jin, the Arcturian with 4 arms, had been studying reports on her personal display. Now she looked up with something approaching amazement in her large black eyes. The efficiency of the human approach. is remarkable, she admitted. Our previous battles required massive fleets and resulted in heavy casualties even when we won. The virus technique allows small ships to disable entire enemy fleets without firing a single shot. Jae Sung, who had been promoted to chief engineer of the combined fleet, smiled at this recognition of his work. The beauty of the method is its simplicity, he said. You don't need advanced weapons or superior numbers. You just need the devourers to believe they are learning something useful when they are actually learning something destructive. Sun He, the empathic Centaurian, had been monitoring the emotional state of the chamber throughout the discussion. Now she radiated calm certainty. The humans chose to share their advantage rather than keep it for themselves, she reminded everyone. They could have kept the virus technique secret and used it to make humanity the dominant species in the galaxy. Instead, they gave it to everyone. This was true, and it had surprised many species. The detailed technical specifications that humanity had provided were now being used by engineers from dozens of different worlds. Human advisors had been sent to every major fleet to help implement the new tactics. Taiho had been listening to the discussion without commenting, but now he felt it was time to speak. "Honored Council," he said, and the familiar sound of his calm, steady voice brought immediate quiet to the chamber. 3 months ago, you saw humanity as primitive and backward. Today, some of you worry that we have introduced dangerous ideas into galactic society. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of creatures he had come to know and respect. Both views are probably correct, he continued. We are primitive compared to your civilizations. We are dangerous to enemies who underestimate us. But we are also something else. He paused, choosing his words carefully. We are your partners, not your leaders, not your servants, but your equals in the work of protecting innocent life. Yeon-su floated down from her position to stand beside the human ambassador. The Galactic Council has made its decision, she announced. Humanity is granted full membership with all rights and responsibilities thereof. Furthermore, Ambassador Taeho is appointed as Special Coordinator for Unconventional Warfare, with authority to develop new tactics for the defense of all Council worlds. The chamber erupted in applause again, but this time it was different. 3 months ago, any applause for humanity would have been polite but half-hearted. Now it was genuine, earned through shared danger and mutual trust. As the noise died down, Minji, Taeho's chief of staff, approached with a data tablet. Her expression was serious despite the celebration around them. Sir, she said quietly, we've received reports from long-range scouts. There are 3 other hostile forces beyond the rim that our xenobiologists believe might be vulnerable to modified versions of the virus technique. Taeho took the tablet and quickly scanned the reports. Unknown aggressors with different technologies and different weaknesses, but all potentially threatening to peaceful civilizations. How long until they reach Council space? He asked. Between 6 months and 2 years, depending on their movement patterns, Minji replied. Taeho nodded and looked around the chamber one more time. These beings had gone from laughing at humanity to depending on human ingenuity in less than a year. Now they were about to face new challenges that would require even more creative solutions. Prepare detailed briefings for the Strategic Planning Committee, he told Minji, and send a message to Earth. Tell them we're going to need more people out here. As the council session ended and beings began to file out of the chamber, many stopped to speak with the human delegation. Where once they had offered condescending politeness, now they offered genuine friendship and partnership. Taeho remained on the platform, watching the diverse crowd of alien beings talk and plan together. Somewhere among them were the seeds of strategies that would protect trillions of lives across hundreds of worlds. And at the center of it all was humanity, the species that had been dismissed as too primitive to matter. Bora approached, her admiral's uniform crisp and professional. It's quite a change from 3 months ago, she observed. Yes, Taeho agreed, but I suspect our real work is just beginning. Through the great windows of the chamber, the stars shone with steady light. Each one represented systems with planets, and peoples who could sleep safely because humanity had taught the galaxy a new way to fight. The Galactic Council had laughed at humanity once. Now they were grateful that laughter had turned to alliance, and in the darkness between the stars, threats that had seemed unstoppable were learning to fear the simple truth that sometimes the most dangerous enemies were the ones you never saw coming.